And welcome to our Christian Recorded Dialogue. As most of you know, my name is Antoine C. Wright, and I bring you greetings from the 7th Episcopal District down in God's country, South Carolina, where Bishop Samuel Green is my bishop. And I always love to extend my love and wishes from the 9th Episcopal District, where my uncle, Bishop Harry L. C. Wright, and my aunt, Supervisor C. Wright, serve as the Episcopal leaders in the 9th District in Alabama. As always, please feel free to drop your home church, your district, where you're from, who your pastor, who your elder, who your bishop may be, or whatever it is that you want those who are watching from around the world to know about how strong the AME bond and connection is, because certainly we are a strongly connected church and bond. I believe the strongest on this side of heaven. And we thank you all every single time you have the opportunity to tune in with us. We bring you greetings from Nashville for our general board meeting. As most of you know, every time there's a general conference, every 4 years, in December, there's a general board meeting that happens in order to get things recalibrated going into the new year. So this year we are in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's been a wonderful time so far. We've had a number of wonderful guests, and we will continue that trend of fantastic and wonderful guests by someone who I would probably describe as a transformational leader. In fact, probably one of the most transformational leaders of our day. She's the eighth president of Tennessee State University here in Tennessee. She's also the international president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated. And if you had the opportunity to visit her bio, you would understand why I've used the word transformational. She's one of two African American women in the country to hold a JD, CPA, and I think a master's degree. One of very few people who have that accomplishment. She served in so many capacities: HBCU graduate, Tennessee State, Clark Atlanta, Georgetown, then Georgetown Law. And if you look at the amount of awards and so many times she would be honored, we would probably spend the next 10 years talking about all the things that she's accomplished. But we are so excited to welcome this transformational leader in the form of Dr. Glenda Glover. Dr. Glover, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be a part of this. Thank you very much.
Dr. Glover, I'll cut right to the chase. While I know so much about you because I've taken the time to study, those who are watching from around the world may not be as familiar with some of the things you've accomplished and some of your work. So, if you could give us the Sunday school version of some of the things you've been able to accomplish and do in your career.
Well, again, I appreciate this moment to have this conversation with you. But I'm so honored because this is a full circle moment for me to I attended Tennessee State University as a student, and now to come back and to be president of the very university that gave me my start. I mean, it's such an awesome blessing. It's just I'm so honored and proud to lead the institution that really set me on this path that I'm on now. So that's the story of where I am. It's a full circle moment in my life, and I'm still enjoying it. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I'm a Memphis native, Memphis, Tennessee. Um, Grew up there and educated in the public school system, and had this desire to attend an HBCU. I visited the campus of Tennessee State University after trying to make my rounds. And after I saw the campus and met the faculty and students, I didn't want to go back to Memphis. I wanted to stay in Nashville, stay at TSU. so, so that's the short version of where I am now, and my desire to be the leader at TSU.
Dr. Glover, clearly your steps have been ordered by the Lord, and you have been called to this moment, I believe, for such a time as this. So, with that being said, we know your faith has played a tremendous role in your journey. Talk about the role your faith has played, but also I want you to do a deep dive in shallow water. So, the Sunday school
Mhm.
version of the role and the relationship you have enjoyed with the AME Church over the years.
Well, you're correct. Faith is a key ingredient in my formula. I have to wake up each morning with a prayer, and I have to go to bed each night with a prayer. Um, and in between that time, there's just moments of Thanksgiving or even requests. I'm going out the door in the morning, Lord. I'm about to walk into Tennessee State University. Don't know what I'm going to encounter, but I know if you're walking just ahead of me, it'll be okay. That's almost an everyday prayer. There's some moments I'm rushing and can't get every word in, but your heart prays. There are days your heart has to pray when you don't get a chance to get on your knees. But I grew up with 12 preachers in my immediate family, and so many were Methodists, many were AME, some were Pentecostal, and some were Baptist. So I got the full gamut, and it was just grew up having to recite scripture. Some people had Bible verses they said before they eat. We had to say almost a whole passage. One Bible verse wasn't enough in our family, and so I just had a love for the scriptures and found comfort in the scriptures, and I still do. And it just became a part of just my life, and the faith is just and AME Church has been so powerful.
Mhm.
The force because I became attracted to AME Church much earlier than any other. Well, the other denominations. I hate to use the word denomination. I think that's what is used to divide us many times, but because they were so inclusive of women at higher levels, the
Mhm.
women in the pulpit. Because there were days I could be the women day speaker at another church, and I couldn't go to the pulpit to make a speech. Or the youth day speaker, and there was the Methodist Church AME was so inclusive of women and embraced women much faster than I could observe than many others, and so that really drew me to AME Church.
Dr. Glover, when I introduced you, I talked about you being the eighth president of Tennessee State University. I oftentimes say this jokingly, but I really mean it when I say the blacker the college, the sweeter the knowledge. Talk about the importance of HBCU, that the role of HBCUs and their importance in today's society.
Well, sure, our country cannot reach its goals without viable, sustainable HBCUs, the economic goals, its education goals, close the wealth gap, the health gap, can't be done without strong and viable HBCUs because we've proven who we are. We've proven that we are the universities that can be trusted we're changing the college landscape. We provide a significant return on investment. We make just enormous contributions throughout this world. Just for example, just 3%, HBCUs only account for 3% of all the colleges in the United States, yet we produce 22% of the bachelor's degrees uh, of African Americans, 25% of African Americans with STEM degrees, 50% of African American public school teachers, 60% of African American health professionals, uh, 50% of African American lawyers, 50% of African American doctors, 85% of African American judges. So we made our contribution. But the drawback with HBCUs is that we have to spend the first few minutes of every conversation defining who we are and why we should be listened to. So that is a problem that we have to still address as our value, the value proposition, and and that's why I'm happy now that HBCUs are on the center stage uh, for a number of reasons. Because this is a year of HBCUs. I think 2022 has been declared a year of HBCUs, and so we're out front, and so our contributions now are being noticed more regularly and more frequently, and it's a good feeling. It's a good time to be an HBCU graduate or an HBCU supporter or someone who paid for someone to attend an HBCU.
I jokingly say, Dr. Glover, when the AME Church leads, the country succeeds, but when HBCU leads, the world
Okay.
succeeds.
I love that.
And I
You're never
think
gonna borrow that, right?
you give me credit, give me credit three times, one for the Son, one for the Holy Spirit. After that, it's all yours. But you flirted with this a bit, but I want you to flush it out. What do you see as some of the challenges when it comes to our HBCUs, especially where you sit now, kind of where you've been? and now that you've been able to, I think, see the full circle of this country, what do you see as some of the challenges? You don't have to go too deep and wide, but what do you see as some of the mainstream challenges for HBCUs?
Well, as a college president, I can see firsthand the needs of HBCUs. I just mentioned one of the challenges is that we spend time trying to determine, trying to just let people know who we are. But beyond that, let me just make sure we are clear that we're not going to continue to answer that question about are we valuable? Do we need HBCUs? I think it's gotten to the point now where it has become almost asinine in our conversations because we know the value of HBCUs and the productivity of HBCUs. But I think the overriding problem is that it's always funding, but before we get to funding, it's a lack of a solid advocacy base. There are no advocates for HBCUs. Funding will come from advocacy. We have a strong alumni base. We're growing into the corporate base, but there's nobody walking the halls of Washington or the Tennessee State Capitol as needed. We have some, but the advocacy is sorely missing in HBCU world. I think that's our biggest problem because if you have folk pushing you and they're always speaking up for HBCUs, the funding will come, the recognition will come. I mean, things will follow beyond that.
Madam President, you not only serve as president of the college, you're also the international president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated, same sorority as our historic vice president, Ms. Kamala Harris. But talk about how that role and your role as president of the college, how those two things have blended together and essentially made you, I think, even more transitional and powerful and prepared leader.
Well, you can't talk about Alpha Kappa Alpha without talking about the Divine Nine, because it's the collaborative effort of the 9 Greek letter organizations, the Alpha Kappa Alpha, Delta Sigma Theta, Zeta Phi Beta, Sigma Gamma Rho, Alpha Phi Alpha, Kappa Alpha Psi, Omega Psi Phi, Phi Beta Sigma, and Iota. All 9 have come together to ensure that issues are addressed that affect African American men and women, boys and girls. We come together. We've addressed the voting rights. That's key on the agenda right now. We're trying to help get the Build Back Better bill passed, getting people out to vote in the election. As nonprofit organizations, and we really can't tell you who to vote for, but we can definitely tell you get you to the polls. And if you get there, you'll figure it out. And so we want to make sure that we're not viewed as stepping and wearing the colors. It's about the substance of the organization. And so Alpha Kappa Alpha, under that umbrella, let me discuss some of the things Alpha Kappa Alpha is doing. And we put together HBCU. But when I got together the program for being international president, someone suggested, let's have an awareness program for HBCUs, an awareness campaign. I said, we don't need any awareness. They're already aware that we exist. We need money. So I said, we're going to raise $1 million in one day. So we did. For three years in a row, I have a 4-year term, 3 years in a row, we raised over $1 million and gave it all to HBCUs. And then the last year in office is now, we raised $2 million, almost $2.4 million. And it goes to set up an endowments. Make sure, because HBCUs don't have the endowments that we need. So we must make sure every school had an endowment. So we gave $50,000 to $100,000, depending on the nature of the amount of the endowment. So that was critical to me, because that's close to my heart, because I know the needs of HBCUs. So we get their funding, get their endowments. They represent scholarship. They represent sustainability. So that's how we pull it together. I use Alpha Kappa Alpha platform to assist HBCUs. Of course, assist Tennessee State.
Sure. Dr. Glover, being a woman, in particular, a black woman, in the moment we're living through, is transformational and transitional all by itself. Give me a readout of what that actually means for you, because that's something I can't relate to. Although my two grandmothers were sharecroppers, although I come from what I call good stock and a black woman, my mother, same with my sisters and aunts and nieces who I hope will grow up to do the same. But talk about what that actually means for you being a black woman in this moment, knowing that you're at the top of the food chart and you have reached a place in your life where not many people even know to pray about to be.
Well, black women are the backbone of this country. We've learned to make the decisions to stretch it. We don't have enough in your home. You pray about it, you stretch it. It's almost like you pray over it, and then it starts to magnify. So we know how to stretch it. Black women know how to be the leaders we've been called to be, because we're so used to doing that. That's who we are. That's what we do. And so there are challenges, of course, the being the African American woman leader, because the expectations are a little different, but you manage through it, you maneuver through it, you learn early that you're not any better than anybody else, but you're just as good. So you make sure that on a daily basis, I get up every morning saying, what can I do to make TSU better? I mean, that's something done every single day. And I pull my team together weekly. We say, now what can we do this week to make TSU better? The Tennessee State has to survive and thrive because of our leadership, because of what we're doing here on this campus this very day. So that's the mode. That's our model. So that's what we have to do each and every day, is to push our university, to push our universities with the S on the colleges, to make sure the HBCU world is made better because of us.
And Dr. Glover, let's talk about the role the church can play and having a true marriage with historical black colleges, universities, and how we make that work. Because sometimes, and oftentimes more than not, there's sort of a disconnect between the role churches play in general versus or related to the college experience, in particular the black college experience. We send our kids off, we give them a Bible, we tell them to read it, pray, but that's it. But there's certainly a bigger role for the church, in particular the black church, to play in order to uplift and empower students, but also uplift and empower our institutions.
Well, the church has been the staying force. The church has been our foundation. The church has been there with us in the struggles. We've stood together in protest. We've kneeled together in prayer. The church has been just in our hearts and minds as we go and approach the difficulties and the challenges that we must address. The church is there to address the problems. Yes, Jesus came. He said, "I came to seek those who were lost. I didn't come to be to look at you who were well already and shake your hand. I came to be the physician, to heal those who need the healing. So the church and the education, the higher education institutions must combine, must get together to make sure we can heal the sick. And the sick, I don't always mean those who have a disease or some type of crippling effect, but we need to heal those who need that power inside to know that you can make it, that power to know you can succeed, the power to know that within you is someone who's going to burst out and become the leader that God has called you to be. So that church and higher education institutions have to work together, because we're bonded together. We're founded on this. We're based on the same foundation. So the two of us working together, that marriage is what's going to propel us into the future, into our next steps.
Thinking about the fact that we have to prepare our students to compete in an ever changing global society, as you forecast for the future and thinking about students that will come through the halls and walls of your so wonderfully put together institution, give us a forecast of what the future of this country looks like in terms of preparing our students for what's next when they leave our HBCU institutions.
Well, we're preparing the total student,
Mhm.
the academic students. We're making sure we meet all aspects of student life. That day is over when a parent drops a student off at campus and come back in 4 years. And that student, that's not the student we had in yesteryear. The student this day works uh, sometimes 20 more hours a week. And we're preparing every aspect of student life. But the next level for all of us in higher education is to ensure we have their public-private partnerships, because as a state school, there's this misconception that the state takes care of Tennessee State University. That is so far from the truth. You know, we get about maybe 26, 27, 8% of our funding comes from the state of Tennessee. The rest comes from tuition and grants and contracts and partners and the corporate world and others that we have made collaborative. We've collaborated with. So that's the nature of who we are as a state institution. And private institutions don't even, have less of a, have more of a budget challenge and less of the state assistance than the public schools, public universities, because we're state assisted, not state supported. And so the next step is to ensure that we're functioning at a level that people understand that we need your support. Higher education needs the support of corporations and foundations and the community. We need the financial assistance. We need your thought leadership. We need you to give if you have ideas for success. Students will stop me and say, "Why don't we try this?" Or someone in the community or alumni will send me a note and say, "Have you considered this?" We appreciate that because it takes all of us to make this happen, to prepare our students to participate and to function and be successful in a global marketplace.
Dr. Glover, we know this pandemic, the worst pandemic since 1913, caused some of the worst economic challenges since 1918, has really ripped through the fabric of who we are as a country. But from communities that look like mine and the ones that you probably grew up in too, it has really, I think, drawn blood from us and really positioned us, in some cases, put us 2 or 3 steps backwards. How has this pandemic impacted the work you do in the Tennessee State University ecosystem?
Well, it was very traumatic and very dramatic. March of 2020 is a starting point that most college presidents and administrators and students, faculty, that's something we will always remember because we had one weekend to switch over to get everything online. But fortunately, TSU at Tennessee State has we have a portal we've already developed, so we just kind of dropped the classes in. I'm oversimplifying it, but it wasn't as bad. In fact, we spent time assisting other universities in getting online because we were more prepared. Because not that we saw this coming, I tell you, I walk by faith, but not that we saw this coming, but because we know that we were approaching the day of distant learning. So we did it from a distant learning standpoint. But with students, but the bigger issue was the students didn't have the technology devices. The students didn't have the broadband. There was no way to get their homework and get the papers in. Of course, they have a cell phone that they could zoom in and with Zoom and the platforms that we had on campus, but they could not do the papers that would do in Word or any modeling in Excel. That was missing, and some of them had to go to the parking lots of banks and Walmart and other places just to get connected because there was no connectivity in some of the rural areas. So COVID pulled back the lens. If you saw the Wizard of Oz, you saw where the little doggy pulled back that curtain. You saw the real thing, and so that's where we were. We pulled back and we saw disparity, and they were saying that Black people were just dying at a higher level because we had this and whether yes we have high blood pressure, yes we have respiratory challenges, and yes we have diabetes, but it's not because of anything that we did. It's because of the disparity in the health systems that became popularly known. It became really aware. It made us more aware of what had happened. Those disparities in the health system that ecosystem that happened years ago is coming home. It came home to roost, and we really saw the effects. We already knew it, but you saw it in the statistics board out for us. And so those were the challenges. That the big challenge was that everybody now could see what COVID really brought to the forefront. It was already there, but it was covered up. So it was uncovered during COVID. And that was one of the bigger things that came out of COVID was that we saw where we really were as a group of African American students, faculty, staff, and community.
Put on the canvas for everybody watching us in this interview the typical Tennessee State University student. I know you're a diverse campus, diverse institution, but if you had to paint the picture of a typical student who enters and exits at the end of their time, Tennessee State University, give me some give me some clarity on what that could look like or usually looks like.
Well, for 185 years, HBCUs have been fulfilling that mission of educating Black students. And yes, we've been very inclusive of anyone who met the standards who come to our HBCUs, and the Tennessee State fits within that model. We look for the top students, we look for the talented students to come to TSU, because the number one reason that a student comes to an HBCU, the number one reason they come to TSU is to get a quality education. That's the reason they come. The other thing is just gravy. Yes, they love seeing people look like them. They love the band. They love going to the football games. But that's part of it. You want to get a quality education. That's why you that's why you come to TSU. So we want to make sure we develop that student. We have students, our population, students who are really 60% of them, 2/3 of our students work. They come from rural areas. They come from major cities. They come from small towns. Um, they live on campus. They live off campus. They they come ready to be poured into. They come ready, eager to learn. I compare my time at TSU with place I spent when I was at other places, but at TSU, there's something about that zeal, that quest, that thirst for knowledge. They won't let this harvest pass. Because I tell people, I can take any student, from any background, anywhere, and make them a scholar. And so that's what we live by. Our mission is to educate students, and that's what we do on a daily basis, a total education of our students.
Dr. Glover, for little girls and little black boys and little black girls watching this interview at home with their parents or grandparents, what advice would you give them as they're preparing to make some decisions about middle school, high school, perhaps college or career for their next steps? What advice would you give from a general standpoint?
To start now, thinking about what you like to pursue as your career, and then think about HBCU world. Think about attending an HBCU. Look at what they will offer you to attend a Tennessee State University, to attend at HBCU, and then stay on that path. It's never too early to get on the right path, and it's never too late to do what's right.
Wow, that's pretty simple and easy advice to follow. Dr. Glover, I know you're a busy woman, so we're going to come around the mountain. Here we come. If you had to give the same piece of advice for the parents and caregivers of those little black boys and little black girls who may be watching, or to some adult who says, you know what, I think I want to go back and try this thing again called school and education because I want better, what would you say?
To choose a career that's going to make you feel fulfilled. It's going to fulfill what you want to do, your dream, your destiny, and do what you would. I mean, we do things many times because others lead us in that direction, because others think that's the best thing for us. But do your research. It's not going to be handed to you. Do your research. If you want to be a school teacher, then research that and see what school teachers do. See what the knowledge base needs to be. See what your typical 8-hour day is going to look like. And it's never too early to start. And if you want to be a lawyer, look at what lawyers do, what it takes to become one. If you want, whatever your dream career is, start researching as early as possible. I knew when I was in the third or fourth grade that I wanted to know all there was to know about everything. I wanted to know about space, about stars, about the grass, about trees, about books, and learning everything possible. I knew the education was the way out of where I lived in Memphis. I was my objective was to get to a better neighborhood and to assist and to assist those who were less fortunate. The turning point in my life was when I watched one of my friends fought the homes in my. I watched the house burn down because of the racial climate of that day. The fire department could not assist this black family, so we stood there with tears in our eyes because we couldn't get them to come almost across the street. It wasn't literally across the street; it was so close across the street because we were state line. We were in the county area of Memphis, and the county and the city didn't communicate well, and they didn't work together. They didn't collaborate, so the house burned down. And so at that point, I knew I wanted to do something that was going to help people understand the fairness, this whole social system. So the next day, my father led a march downtown Memphis, and a few days later, they got fire protection in our neighborhood. And so I knew I was going to do my career is going to include something that helps something on a social scale. I didn't know we were trying to train others how to become a CPA or try to even lead the college, lead the school. My very favorite institution, TSU. I didn't know that at that point. But and even if you ask me personally, if I had to do it over, what would I change? You know what I would do differently? I would trust God sooner. Grow up knowing that God is the creator and everything, but I wouldn't have stayed up worrying all night long about certain things. I wouldn't have spent time agonizing. I would have trusted God much, much sooner. And so that's my advice to students now. Trust God sooner at an early age. That's when you grow up, knowing that you got that trust and that coverage and the blood that gives you strength from day to day, but never loses power. So you got that growing up. So that's my advice is to start trusting God early as you go onto your career path, as you start looking at what you want to do. Always make sure that you know that you got a God that's gonna lead you and guide you and take you in the right direction and ensure that your destiny is certain, your destiny is secure. So that's my advice to the students.
Wow, I should take an offering off of that one. That's powerful. Trust God soon. I'm gonna tweet that today. That's powerful. I'll give you credit 3 times. after three, you can hang it up.
That is yours.
Dr. Glover, before I let you go, when your career is done, when you've moved on or transitioned to something else, what do you want the world to remember you by as the president of Tennessee State University, but also as the international president of Alpha Kappa Alpha?
Repeat it, please. I'm so sorry. Repeat that for me.
I said, when your career is done or when your time is done as president of the college and as international president of Alpha Kappa Alpha, what do you want the world to remember you by during that time period?
Oh, just the fact that I tried to make sure that my life would exemplify what it meant to be a leader and a follower at the same time. That you follow your destiny, you follow your truth, you bring truth to the room, and you lead others to what's right and what's true and what's expedient, and stay on the path of your own destiny. Don't look to the right or to the left. Don't get dismayed. Don't get deterred. Follow the example of Jesus. He came here to save the world. He didn't care what they said about him. They called him crazy. They called him Beelzebub. But he stuck to his mission. He came here to save the world. He stuck to. So I tell people I stuck to my mission. Use an example of Jesus. Of course, he got mad in church one Sunday and beat the folk out of church. But let's put that aside. In my profession, it's called assault and battery. But let's not focus on that. But stick to the mission. Stick to your mission. So I'd like folks to just remember that I stuck to my mission. And I tried to bring others along. and those that criticized and those that couldn't understand and said, oh, she can't do both of those. She can't be president of TSU and AK at the same time. And I tell, don't inflict your incapacities on me. You don't know what I'm capable of doing. So stick to your own mission. And that's what I say. I want them to know that I led by sticking to my mission and understanding the depth of my capacities. And then I knew that God was directing my destiny.
Trust God sooner.
Trust God sooner.
Oh, Lord. Madam President, thank you for your time. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for what you're doing to prepare this country to move toward that oh so perfect union that we oftentimes read about in our studies and in our time, both during our K through 12 education. I appreciate what you're doing and keep doing what you're doing on the front line.
Thank you so much.
I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.